CNN might not be ISIS, but apparently they are Al-Qaeda. CNN hired top Al-Qaeda propagandist for award-winning documentary featuring the war in Syria and wants to cover its tracks. Star CNN correspondent Clarissa Ward worked with Al-Qaeda media man Bilal Abdul Kareem. With a sardonic grin, Abdul Kareem described how he was slighted. This undercover in Syria, you can Google it, it won the prestigious Peabody Award, and it won the prestigious Overseas Press Club Award, which are basically the highest awards in journalism for international reporting. Now, CNN barely mentioned my name. I'm telling you, somehow CNN must have forgotten that I was the one that filmed it. I guess they forgot that. Indeed, Abdul Kareem's name was a mere footnote in the Peabody Awards press release on its honoring of CNN. The organization praised Clarissa Ward for going undercover into northern Syria to document Russian influence on the fighting and to navigate the ongoing devastation, but credited Abdul Kareem only in small print, despite the fact that he was responsible for providing CNN with its on-the-ground footage. Contrary to Abdul Kareem's claim that CNN had simply forgotten him, the network may have had a reason to airbrush him out of its public relations material. The man Ward contracted to take her into rebel-controlled territory was well established as one of the top English-language propagandists for Al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra, along with other extremist groups fighting the Syrian government. I would also imagine that the reason they removed Abdul Kareem from the credits was in order to distance themselves from his potential ties to terrorism. Either way, the unethical nature of this omission is something that I thought was beneath even CNN standards. A news organization with employees that are directly working with enemy forces really makes you think, really activates those almonds. Let's speculate for a minute. What if CNN is compromised? What if their lack of journalistic integrity isn't a result of a typical employee, but a group of atypical employees? What if they were taken over by terrorist sympathizers, to put it simply, in order to emit their propaganda throughout America? Nah, couldn't be. I will admit, this is unlikely, but I do wonder sometimes if something like this could even happen. What would people do if they found out a major news organization was actually sending out purposefully demoralizing propaganda that is played in order to shame the country for acts of the few? What if their purpose was to push an agenda that could potentially destabilize the American way of life? Nah, couldn't be. All joking aside, I think it's more likely that CNN is filled with incompetent people, not malicious people. We do not know their motive, but we do know that they are dishonest. So this news doesn't reveal anything we didn't already know about CNN, at least regarding their journalistic integrity. I do wonder sometimes, though, when there are tangible ties between a major corporation and a terrorist organization, if it could really just be coincidence. The original source was Alternet, which is a news aggregate website for a lot of alternative media progressive outlets. And Salon picking this up, I don't know, it just seems weird. You would think a lot of them would stand behind CNN, but maybe they're trying to establish their own credibility by shitting on and beating the already decaying corpse that is CNN. As for the article itself, you have to admit, CNN omitting that man's name and that man happening to have ties to Al-Qaeda, it kind of makes you wonder. Did they know that he had ties to Al-Qaeda? And perhaps they felt that their coverage was worth having some ties to some terrorist organizations. But they care not to say anything at all. Just omit the man's name and pretend that it never happened. So here's a short clip of Brian Seltzer's show, and he claims that or one of his guests claimed that all of the criticism on social media against CNN for all of their unethical business practices are mostly a small group of people using bots, because they just can't fathom the idea that maybe they're the bad guys in this scenario. It seems like they can't even understand why people might not like them very much.
Ben Jacobs, do you see a connection between the virtual world, threats and harassment, and kind of all the hate that's online directed at media companies, and what happens in physical spaces, whether it's on Capitol Hill or when you're covering a Montana election?
Yeah, I certainly, parts of my situations were anomalous, but having been to 18 months worth of Trump rallies and having seen how this bleeds in, that you're seeing it bleed in together, and this is, to be clear, this is a very small group of folks. That this is not, as John pointed out, this is amplified by bots. This is a small group of people who are, just very dedicated for whatever reason to pursuing journalists. But that there is that bleeding over, and that it creates something where it's becoming real issues, and we're getting closer and closer to where that line is actually crossed between publishing addresses and showing up, as we've seen.
A little bit of advice for the dude that got body slammed by a man that is now a member of Congress. Fake news is too nice of a term. What you guys are propagandists. Whenever I refer to you, that's what I'm going to call you from now on. And so people who are criticizing your lack of ethics, your lack of moral compass, these people aren't harassing you. They're not calling for violence against you. What they are merely doing is sharing their ideas, sharing this notion that you're full of shit. You aren't about exposing the truth and sharing it to the world. Independent journalists, like, say, Tim Pool, for example, is a great example. I don't always watch his stuff, but he puts out very objective content. Journalists are not supposed to touch the content. They're supposed to just produce it. And what CNN does is on every dimension, they change things around in order to fit their narrative. And they've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar so many times at this point. I don't know about you. I don't believe a fucking thing they say. I assume that whatever they're saying, the opposite is actually true. Well, before I ramble on too long, I'm just going to go ahead and end the video there, but let me know what you guys think about these accusations from Alternet and from Salon. Interesting, right? But I'm going to end the video with this short little clip here. Enjoy.
I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news. Your organization's terrible. False and fake.
The Russian thing is just a big nothing burger.